So please be on time. We have regular attendance for all the policy discussions, and please to submit assignments on time. All right. So now, can you all switch on your cameras, please? Yes. All right. So today's discussion is more or less about what policy making is, what are the various practical difficulties, ground level, that people who are involved in execution face, and what are the various policy solutions that we can bring in to minimize the problems related to policy implementation. So these are the various areas. So before we begin today's discussion, I really want to know, what is policy making according to you? Like, what do you understand by policy making? Any of you? Anybody who wants to volunteer to go ahead. I think you're on mute, Nirja. You're on mute.
Am I audible now? So I think in our day-to-day lives, talking on a really basic level, we encounter many challenges. So to overcome those, we, as a procedure, apply policy making in which, for instance, we see that our kids are not getting quality education. So we will analyze the situation and we will try to think of all the possible solutions that can possibly better the situation, because at the end of every problem, if we solve it, there lies some sort of prosperity. So I think policy making is the way to get to that destination.
Absolutely, absolutely. Policy making is something, those are the various steps that's taken in a direction to achieve a desired goal, or that goal can be adequate education, sanitation, health, or any other social things that the government wants to achieve, right? Absolutely. Any other definitions or any other things that you feel public policy can be, or policy making in general can be? Shreya, Shruti, Devyani, any of you?
Yeah, so I think according to me, policy making is all about making of the rules, procedures, giving people the rights, including the fundamental rights and also like the duties in order to, just meet their basic needs and solve the problems that they're facing. And also basically to teach them on how to, act like good citizens.
Yeah, public policy is all about giving a proper guidelines, a structure, a basic overview of what a policy can be, how it can be implemented, or generally we can say what government chooses to do or not to do about a particular policy issue. That can be policy making in general. They have a particular course of action that they can choose in order to solve a particular problem, right? So anything else? Shruti, Devyani, any of you, what do you think about policy making?
So, according to me, finding problems and giving a thinking about a solution to the problem is policy making.
Yeah, improving the living standard, like the overall living standard of a country or nation, whatever you call it.
Absolutely. So I think basically we all can agree on one premise, that public policy or policy making comes into picture only when there is a policy problem. Like there is a particular issue, the government identifies that issue, and only then there is the solution part, and that's where policy making, the role of policy making comes into the picture, right? Okay, on that note, we have all defined what policy making is. Now, we know in India, we have a lot of policies in place. I think even in the previous policy discussion also, we've highlighted this problem. We have a lot of policies in place, but the problem lies in policy implementation. And so on that note, what do you guys think? What are the various problems that are faced by bureaucrats, executives, or any other NGOs that are actually working on ground for policy implementation or policy making in general? What are the various problems faced by them? What do you guys think about that?
Corruption in general, like people who are holding the power actually is more focused on their self-interest rather than us, like the citizen. So I think that's one of the biggest issue why policies like are not able to be implemented properly.
Absolutely. Like corruption is not just about taking money or something that's in kind. Okay, it's basically misuse of one's power and authority. Like it can be anything. It's just not taking. Okay, somebody's taking money in an RTO office, and it's just not that somebody not going to office on time also accounts to corruption because basically the person is misusing the person's authority, right? So of course, corruption can be in various forms. Other than that, what are the various issues?
So, while making policy, like they do not consider various stakeholders. There are no many debates or like they do not take any um
Stakeholder
any-
consensus.
yeah, any opinions from other like who are very well educated in that particular area. So there are no discussions about the particular policy, like when they're making a policy.
Or even like opinion of the people for whom they are making the policy. They should hear us out, like what we want exactly, what our problems are exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Devyani and Shruti have highlighted.
Arya, you're
Yeah,
on mute.
yes.
Arya, we couldn't hear you.
Yes, I'm so sorry. So I think Devyani and Shruti have highlighted a very important problem, two important problems rather. One is stakeholder consensus. That is, we need to take into consideration the various people who are involved in a particular policy making or a policy problem. When it is, we need to consider this various stakeholders. It can be NGOs, it can be civil society organizations, it can be the people, in fact, who are getting affected by a particular policy problem or anything of that sort, other than political consensus. And there is another one debate that we can start. That is, should we adopt a bottom-up approach or a top-down approach? That is, should the policy solutions begin from the grassroots level? That is, people give suggestions to the government and then the government consider it. Or there is a centralized authority in the center and then they give, okay, this is the solution, that one size fits all approach. So that's a different debate altogether. What method should we adopt? We're considering you have told about the stakeholders. That means we are supporting a bottom-up approach, right? We need to a grassroots level policy making is that you. I think Shruti and Devyani, both of them are supporting that a bottom-up approach, right? Right? Am I right, Shruti?
Yes, yes.
All right, that's a very important thing, right? For example, the Anganwadi, the Poshan, I think I've discussed with you all the last time also, the Poshan app that is given by the government. Every Anganwadi worker is expected to update the details on an app. But however, what happens? There is no internet connectivity in the first place. So when there is no internet connectivity, there is no point in having that particular app. It's wastage of money, manpower, resources, and everything because the basic infrastructure is not there in place. However, this problem wouldn't have come if they had taken the opinion of people who are working on ground. Like if the Anganwadi workers were taken into consideration and asked them for their opinion and then asked what are the various necessities that they have in order to help them function that Poshan app, then probably this problem they wouldn't have faced, right? So of course, that's a very important point that Devyani and Shruti both of you have highlighted. Other than these, what are the various problems that are being faced?
Yeah, I feel like the thing is like you have implemented a policy, but then of course for implementing any policy, you need all the proper
Can you be a
resources.
bit louder? I'm not able to hear you.
Now am I audible? Yeah, so I was saying that any policy, the proper implementation of any policy requires proper allocation of resources. So of course, if resources are not properly allocated, you can't implement any policy. So I think the problem that is linked to it is that untimely delivery. You can take the example of like the midday meal scheme. So in many recently it happened in Pune where in the Zilla Parishad school, the children were not able to get their midday meals because they did not get their dry rations and everything. So the meal was not prepared. I think that is one issue. Another one is there's also not a lot of flexibility in the implementation of the program. So what happens is like there's a lot of discrepancy in what is written, what is actually implemented. The ground reality is that people who are actually implementing, they have little control over how things should be implemented, while they are the one who are more knowledgeable about what actually needs to be done. So for every scheme requires approval for the government, even which is of course very time consuming and usually not happens. So that is also a problem.
Thank you so much, Shreya, for highlighting very important points. In terms of funds, yes, there are a lot of schemes or policies in place, but however, sufficient funds are not allocated. For example, if you look at the Narega scheme, that's an absolutely brilliant scheme. But what has happened? There is no resources that's available. There's no funds. In fact, this budget, the funds allocated have been reduced. So what happens? The salary or the wages are not paid timely. So the entire intended purpose of that particular Narega scheme of providing labor, the wage labor, is failing there, because at the end of the day, they're not giving timely wages, then it is waste, right? So that's one. And of course, timely delivery of services. There has been set deadlines. However, consistently, there are various schemes wherein the deadlines are just shifted. First, it will be 2022, then 24, then 26. It just goes on moving, and they're not able to achieve the desired goals within the set timeline. That is also another major problem that's being faced. Thank you so much, Shreya, for identifying very important points. Thank you. Devyani, any other point that you want to add?
Yes. Hello. Yeah. So the lack of financial services so it will delay the implementation process, or there are some good policies which cannot be implemented due to financial constraint.
Yeah, I think that's the same point that Shreya also highlighted. The financial constraints or the devolution of finances, even to the local governments, the urban local bodies, is also another major problem, right? Like urban local bodies always have to depend on the state government in order to get sufficient funds. So they always have a shortage of funds, or they have funds that's being released late. So that way, they're not able to achieve the desired goals within a stipulated time. Yes, absolutely. And do you want to add any point?
I think
Yeah, and
yes, Neerja, go ahead. Yeah, Devyani, who wanted to talk?
okay, I'll go. So most of the schemes, it is different in a different like in Kerala, it is different. In Karnataka, it is different due to many like social, because of the cultural diversity or something. So there is no uniformity in the scheme. I think yeah, uniformity of schemes is not
Yes,
followed.
but uniformity in schemes, one thing, there are two aspects to it. So one, firstly, when uniformity of schemes is to be brought in, there needs to be a centralized approach. The only problem with centralized approaches, like India is such a vast country, and every state has got its own local problems. Like we cannot come up with one size fits all approach, and there have been multiple schemes where one size fits all approach have been adopted, and it has failed miserably, mainly because we have that kind of a diversity. So however, we cannot bring in a uniformity across nation, right? That's something that is very difficult to achieve. And even if they, let's say they achieve it, there are various problems that's coming up when they're adopting that method, right? So yes, Neerja, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, so I went through a research paper by an expert, and I think it sums up the whole discussion that you all did, that a policy making as a process goes wrong at two places, either at its implementation or that we are applying wrong policies, that those policies are not suiting us in some way or the other. Uh, so I mean, I cannot, right now I'm thinking of examples of any policies which were not meant for us, but we still applied them, and they cost us, in terms of not just funds, but they, negatively affected our people. So I think it's such a delicate process, right? That is what I wanted to say.
Yes, absolutely. Policy making is a very delicate process. And moreover, policy making is something that functions in a cyclical basis, right? Okay, first we identify a problem, then we evaluate, then we come up with various policy solutions, then we implement those solutions. However, what happens is in most of these policies, it just ends in the implementation phase, and feedback is not given importance. So only when feedback is taken, we understand, okay, what are the major loopholes, where have we missed the particular tangible outcomes, and only then we can rework on that policy and make the policy better. But however, most policies currently in place just stops at the implementation phase, and the evaluation and the feedback loop is not given importance. So that's one of the major problems that I personally feel is there in the current policy making arena in Indian setup, right? And do you want to add something?
Not much. I just wanted to say, like, policy, it has to have the consent of two people, two sets of people, the executive, that is the civil servants as well as the political leaders. So more often than not, the political leaders focus on their gain, like someone had mentioned, their gain. So the civil servants, their voices are often not heard. I mean, they come up with good policies, but what's implemented is not exactly what they meant or what they wanted to come. Again, that is a form of corruption, but still that affects a lot of policies. Like that's what we read on paper, and what's implemented is what's happening in the political arena.
Absolutely. So influence of politics and policymaking in India is very big. So we would have all witnessed there are various schemes that was in place and it would be renamed when the new government comes in. Like there will be the same exact schemes that would be there in place and it would be renamed with a few additional features. So that way what happens, it is just repetition of the schemes. And at the end of the day, it's the vote also plays a major role. Right? Vote bank politics is something that is very, very important, especially in India. Like India is a democracy wherein people have to elect their representatives. And that's the place where the politicians or the elected representatives also try to bring in various measures that is people friendly. They want to attract more votes. But what happens is they just rename the schemes, or there is nothing that's taken, like the opinion of the bureaucrats or the experts are not being taken into consideration. So rather than political agenda is given more importance. So that's something, again, that is a few areas where the schemes are again set to fail because it doesn't address the required problem, right? The whatever problem that we have identified is not addressing those problems, right? Absolutely. All right. So on that note, now let's move to the solutions part. We have all identified what are the various policy issues that we have while implementation or the policy formulation in general. Now moving on, what are the various solutions that you think we can do, we as policy enthusiasts, how can we come up with various policy solutions to reduce these problems? Shruti, do you want to go first? Okay, Shreya, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I was saying that see what happens in elections is that before election you're taking votes for the candidates about who should be of CM or whatever. But what happens is that when you're making a public policy, now this is something which is actually going to impact you much more closely than the leaders that you're going to elect. So why not, just instead, why not take votes on what kind of policy should be implemented or what kind of features that people want in their policy. So I feel that there should be a voting mechanism while making the policies as well. And of course, the feedback that you were talking about.
Absolutely. But the only problem is, this is a very good solution, but the only problem is, it can be implemented in Indian setup. Like because of the vast population that we have, for us conducting an election once in 5 years, it is in itself a big expenditure on the the exchequer. It's a very big expenditure, right? So we cannot have something like when we vote for individual set of policies or certain things that we want for. Rather, I think that's the case in small countries like Sweden, Norway, and everywhere, where there is people directly vote or in favor of a particular policy. But however, in Indian setup, that is very difficult, and that's why we have elected representatives who is expected to work on our behalf, right? But however, there's a very brilliant solution, not going to deny, but however, application in the Indian scenario is that bit difficult, right? All right. Any other solutions that you want to give up? Shruti, Nirja, Devyani, anything?
So policies are made for public. So if there is no public involvement or people do not cooperate, so there's no point in policy making. So I think people should be very cooperative and they should be aware. So yeah, without that there is no point in policy making.
Absolutely.
Public involvement.
Yeah, but for public involvement, we do have various measures like Citizen Starter, wherein like people, like every government office is expected to come out with this particular chart wherein there is a timeline to achieve. Like for example, if they have to get a particular certificate, this can be they can get it within these many days. So these are Citizen Starter that's currently in place, or there is RTI where people have access to information, but however, what is happening, it is not being implemented properly. So even with RTI, if there's proactive disclosure of information by the government, the burden of RTI applications can be reduced. So lack of proactive disclosure of information is another major problem. And people-centric approach, there are a lot of initiatives that's there in place on paper, but however, nothing is being implemented. The Citizen Charter, for that example that I've given you, is that mandatory for the government to make sure it's there in every government office. But however, how many people are aware of what Citizen Charter is? I'm pretty sure even among us, most people are not aware of what Citizen Charter is. I think from seeing a few faces, I think yeah. So those are things that we need to be knowing. Government has to do sufficient awareness that, okay, these are things that you as citizens have right to know about these things. So these are some areas that they need to work on, creating awareness, because there are things in place, but however, we are not using it much, right? Any other solutions?
I think with policy making, there always come trade-offs. For instance, very generic example of how we make dams, and we have to overlook the environment. But if we start looking at the environment, we'll have to compromise at some level industrial development. So, but there have been some techniques developed to assist policymakers. So if only we take seriously those techniques, which is like cost to benefit analysis and things like that, I think we can make policy making process more smooth and friendly, people friendly.
Thank you so much, Neeja, for highlighting the most important problem. That's the trade-off part, right? So public policy is something that works where it cannot satisfy everybody. Like there are so many stakeholders when you consider a particular policy, there are so many stakeholders in place, and it is impossible for any policy to satisfy all these stakeholders. And there is a trade-off. And this trade-off, as Neeja has exactly pointed out, is done through cost-benefit analysis, wherein we minimize the cost and maximize the benefit. So, and without trade-offs, policy making is impossible because, as I said, the multiple stakeholders that are involved in it. Thank you so much, Neeja, for highlighting this very important problem. Yes, Shruti, do you want to add something?
I'm thinking.
All right. Anne, do you want to add something?
I'm now just listening to these topics, and I feel like one of the most common thing the people at least discussed is like the plebiscite, as we've seen in Sweden and other countries. It is a very effective way, but like you said, it's not possible in India. I mean, we've got a huge population, we're very diverse, and even then people are not sure what to like. So we just look at the amount of nota votes that go, and you can understand people are not sure which side to go. So what I believe is like if people have a clear idea about the policies they see, and if they can make up their mind on it, again that might make a difference. Like if you just wanted to stop corruption, just make sure that you do not encourage it. Like sometimes people unknowingly encourage corruption because they want to get their things done faster. So if we could make a small change, like okay, I don't want, even if it takes some time, I don't care, I just won't support corruption. That attitude can change at least some things. So if small changes that people take, if they can make up their mind, some policies can be executed much better.
Absolutely.
And again, like I said, Indian population is very diverse, very vast. Like there's my second most populous country, and nothing's ever goes as it plans. Like nothing. Like even if you implement a policy, you've got everything on the go, everything ready to go, but at the end, there are some issues we don't face. Like it could be some people just making up some political issues, or people not understanding it and fighting for something else. So it's never easy to prepare a policy in India.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you, Anne. But however, see, there is a thing, I'm not sure if how many of you are aware with this. There is a Gram Sabha in villages, right? Like under each Gram Panchayat, there's something called Gram Sabha, wherein all the elders of a particular village who are eligible to vote come up and they do something called social audit. That is, they review the fund, they review what are the budget that's being allocated for MGNREJ funds, or what are basically there is social audit. That is, people themselves sit and see, okay, what are the timelines, have they achieved it? So this is something that's again citizen-centric approach that have been adopted, right? The Gram Sabha, the social audit, where people are involved. So basically, we need to take measures where people and civil society organizations are given more opportunity, wherein the gaps that are there by the government are being filled in by these people. Of course, civil society organizations are meant only for supporting the government, but currently, at least the NGOs or other organizations are filling in the gaps where the government has been failing. For example, in Karnataka, the food is being delivered by an NGO. The midday meal schemes is being delivered by an NGO called Akshay Patra, because and they are doing a wonderful job. So there are areas where these civil society organizations are filling in gaps, and these are again citizen-led bodies, right? At the end of the day, these organizations are citizen-led bodies, and that way we are trying to bring in more like people-centric approach also. However, there are draft bills that are being in place, and they're asking for citizens' opinion. Like there were a lot of schemes there are a lot of policies that are being initiated by the government and put it in public, ask for public opinion and what they think about it. There are measures that's being taken asking for people's opinion, but however, that's very limited. That's also because the vastness of our country, and we are not in a position to hold a plebiscite. That's the only problem, right? Other than this, what are the various solutions that you think we can bring in? Or what are some of the best practices that you all have seen? Something like Gram
I
Sabha,
just wanted
social
to
audit.
add. I wanted to add some things
Yes.
like you said, NGOs play a very important role in filling the gaps that the government does not, cannot make the ends meet. So, like when we have the NGOs playing almost a vigilante position in the economy or in the society, I mean, so maybe the government, they need to consider this a competition. Like, okay, maybe if this is the rate it goes, NGO can actually become something like Karl Marx had this talked about a socialist state. So if the NGOs are to become more, how do you say, more popular than the government, it might make the government sweat, I guess.
Yes, and no. That's because we have a democratic country wherein government is expected to work as a welfare state. However, NGOs and civil society organizations are only there to support the government and to make sure citizens, and it helps the citizens, it makes sure citizens' views are conveyed to the government, right? But however, where we are leading to is a very dangerous way, wherein there are substantial policy gaps, and that's being filled by the NGOs, and that's not the right way that it has to work. Government has to be in place, and NGOs should be a support system for the government. But however, gradually the role of government is diminishing. But I think that's the policy gap that we can identify, and we can try to make it better, right? Any other solutions or best practices that you all have seen? Yeah.
I'd like to add that it has been concluded, by analysis and some reports that India should adopt a specialist approach against a generalist approach, meaning that many times we give civil servants or IAS officers the authority over making policy decisions. They come from a background which is very general. They do not have trainings or expertise in taking niche decisions. So their generalized approach harms, more than it benefits. Secondly, I'd like to highlight that since coalition parties came in the scenario, what happened was to provide with as many ministers' portfolios, there was fragmentation of ministries. So, for instance, for a transport decision to be made, a file has to go through 5 different ministers or 5 different ministries. How that affects the decision is that this is the kind of decentralization or fragmentation which is required in the implementation process. If only we decentralize in implementation, it becomes beneficial in the policy making process, in the initial process where the policy is coming. It does not need to go through so many stages. It is said that it undermines or negatively affects the policy in principle. So that's what I wanted to highlight.
Thank you, Neerja. So yeah, like one is, I think you've highlighted the lateral entry thing that's currently in place, wherein we are trying to recruit specialists along with generalists to work in the policy execution and policy formulation and execution phase. Yes, the lateral entry is currently being adopted by the government. And secondly, decentralization has its own good effects and bad effects. But I personally feel one of the major problem is in the Indian setup, their departments work in silos. That is, let's take a very basic example. Okay, so let's just assume a pipeline is being that the road is being dug up for putting a pipeline. So what happens? PWD works separately, water supply department works separately. Then the cable or they work separate. Electricity department works separate. So what happens? The work that has to be done in one day, it takes up 5 or 6 days, because one day there is no commonality between the departments. That way, there is no proper communication that's happening. So first, one person will come, dig the road, put a pipeline. Again, next department will come, dig a road, and then put the cable connection. So that way, what happens? The departments, when it's working in silos, it leads to wastage of manpower, resources, and everything. So if they work together with adequate communication, I think in that way, the recent PM Gati Shakti scheme that's being implemented by the government, wherein a lot of ministries have come up together to implement various policies and schemes, is a very good initiative. So that way, we can save a lot of resources, manpower, time, and there will be adequate and timely implementation of the schemes also. And of course, Neerja, you've highlighted like the 2 points that you've brought in, brilliant points. Thank you. Any other points that you guys want to add on? Ria, do you want to add on something? Ria, are you there? All right. So yes, and do you want to add something?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are, Ria.
Just a minute, just give me one.
Yeah. All right. And do you want in the gap? Do you want to add something in the meanwhile?
No.
All right.
I think you've covered all points I can think of.
All right. Okay. So I think we have all identified very important problems and what are the various solutions. I think it was a very fruitful discussion. Like I really liked whatever we talked today. Like there were a lot of new things that I also learned today. And Ria, like if you could make it fast.
Yeah. I'm just done.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So my topic for today is regionalism. I'm so sorry I joined the discussion late. So like, was it covered or something like that?
No, we are just trying to, you don't have to like speak for 2 minutes straight. We're just having a policy discussion right now, wherein you just identify what are the few problems that you think the policy making or the policy implementation that currently India is facing, and you can give policy solutions for the same.
Yeah, all right. So like, I'll talk about regionalism. Is that fine? Yeah. So like, regionalism really makes policy implementation in India really difficult, because like all the regions have their specific features and specific policies have to be designed for them. So that is what creates this national level chaos, like which policy to implement where. And even the local government, sometimes there are clashes between the schemes of the local government and the central government. So like that is one of the main reason why policies are not being able to like get implemented effective. So like, as we can see in many cases, like the policies made for a particular area have to be very different than some other area, because if we observe the educationally backward blocks, the policies that are supposed to be implemented there are not always relevant for the areas that are well educated. But just a minute, I'm so sorry, just a minute.
All right. By the time Ria comes back, I think she has focused on a major problem. That's the growth of regionalism, wherein there are states that are functioning really well, but however there are states which are consistently performing poor. Like there are, like, even though even the central government allows a lot of money to these its particular states, they're consistently performing bad on various social indicators. And there are a lot of reports that have come up, be it NFHS survey or be it like any other report that's being released by the government. It's very obvious that there are certain states that are performing consistently poor, and that's also because historically also there are various reasons for it. But however, southern states comparatively they perform better. And another major problem that I think Ria has identified is the same scheme that's being implemented. There's clash of schemes. The state government and the central government, the schemes that are being implemented more or less focuses on the same goals, but they have different names. So there is duplication of schemes in place. Of course, Ria, do you want to add on?
Yeah. So like that leads to uneven development in many areas. So like I think what should be done is proper coordination between the center and the state, and like proper planning commissions with representatives from both center and state with equal importance. Like all of their decisions should be given equal importance, and likewise things should be implemented in our country.
Yeah, I think in that regard, the coordination between the center and the state, yes. But in that regard itself, the Planning Commission was abolished and Niti Aayog came into existence is mainly because they had to give representation for the states and the center. And I'm not telling it's a very neutral body or very impartial or anything, but however, there is better representation of states with after Niti Aayog came into existence, right? Even with regard to voting pattern or anything, it is much better than what it was before, right?
Yeah.
So you want to add something, Ria?
That only, like the importance of all the representatives should be equal, and like likewise schemes should be implemented in each area. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. So all right, I think today's discussion we can wrap up. It was a wonderful discussion. Really, I think it was really nice and enlightening for me as well. Like I got to know a lot of new things today. Do any of you want to add something or give a feedback or anything, or we can conclude the session? Do you all want to add something? Anybody? Nija, Shruti, Devya, Nisha.
I don't want to add something, but like, can we get the topics for the polity discussion like more earlier?
Sure. Definitely. I think that we'll discuss in the group. We are right now live on YouTube, but otherwise, anything else? That's it. All right. So we can wrap up this week's discussion. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good week ahead. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.